Hello friends, in this lecture, we're going to stop the enemy from getting too close. Okay, so let me explain how this is going to work. So let's say that the player is inside of the sphere and the enemy is going towards the player. Currently, we're letting the enemy completely overlap the player. What we want to do is stop the enemy at a certain distance. So in order to do this, we're going to create a function called shouldMoveToTarget. This is going to return true if we should keep moving or false if we should stop. It's going to take a look at the distance between the enemy and the player, the horizontal distance, and it's going to compare this distance to the stop distance to target variable we created. We set this to be 70. So in this case, it's going to take a look at this distance. If it's greater than 70, we're going to keep moving. So this is going to return true. If it's less than 70, we're going to stop because the shouldMoveToTarget function is going to return false. So that's how this is going to work. Let's go ahead and start implementing this. So first of all, we're going to declare the shouldMoveToTarget function here in the header. So at the bottom, we're going to say bool shouldMoveToTarget. It's not going to accept any arguments and it's going to return the boolean. Let's create the function body as well, right after the tick function. Let's also paste in the class name. Awesome. So, like I explained in the presentation, this function is going to return a boolean. So let's create that boolean. It's going to be called result, and it's going to be false by default. And we're going to return this at the end of the function. Just like that. And in the middle here, we're going to decide if the enemy should keep moving or not. But to be able to do that, we first need to make sure that we have the follow target. Because if we don't have it, there's nothing to move to, so we should just go ahead and return false. But if we do have the follow target, we're going to first calculate the distance between the enemy and the player, and then we're going to compare that to the stop distance to target. So let's create the distance to target variable, which is going to be the follow target get actor location dot x minus get actor location dot x. So we're taking the x position of the player and subtracting the x position of us, the enemy. This is going to give us the distance between these two, and we want to get the absolute value out of this to make it positive in both cases, in the case where the player is on the left side and on the right side. And that is because we want to calculate this, we want to compare this to the stop distance to target. And if it is negative, we're not going to be able to compare it. So we're getting the positive distance from the player to the enemy in both those cases, like I said. So now we're going to calculate the result, which is going to be the distance to target greater than stop distance to target. So this here is going to be true if the distance to target is greater than the stop distance to target. And it's going to be false if the distance to target is less than the stop distance to target. And that's going to give us exactly what we want, because if the distance between the player and the enemy is greater than the stop distance to target, in this case 70, that means there's still some distance to go until we hit that 70 centimeter mark. If it's less than that, that means we're already, past the stop distance, so we shouldn't be moving anymore. So that is the shouldMoveToTarget function. Now we're going to use this in tick. So if you want to, as a small challenge, you can try and use it in tick yourself. Okay, we're going to create an if statement here and say shouldMoveToTarget. And then we're going to move all of this in there, just like that. Now, before we move, we're going to first check if we should be moving. If true, we're going to go ahead and move. If not, in the else case here, this means we are already close enough to the player. In this case, we want to attack. So we're going to create a comment here saying attack, but that's going to be done in an upcoming lecture. And by the way, I realized that I'm doing this same calculation twice here and there, and that is fine. We can actually put this one into a variable here and then pass it into this function. That is a possibility, but I'm not going to do it, just pointing out. So this should be enough to achieve what we want. Since we created something new in the header, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of Unreal. We're going to rebuild the project and then test if this worked or not. So let's go ahead and test this. Now the enemy should stop after reaching the stop distance to target. And as you can see, that's the case. I actually think that the detector sphere is too small because the enemy stops following us very quickly. So let's actually go into the enemy blueprint and make the detector sphere something like 180 maybe. Just a little larger so that the enemy doesn't stop. Okay, I think that's good. And as you can see, it's working. This distance should be enough for the enemy to attack us and also for us to attack the enemy back. The next step here is going to be making the enemy actually face the player. And after that, we're going to set up the animation source and the animation blueprint for the enemy. But for this lecture, this is going to be all. So let's do a recap and then we can end it. So first of all, in this lecture, we created the should move to target function, which returns true or false depending on the distance from the player to the enemy, and that distance being greater than the stop distance to target. So that's the should move to target function. And then we used it inside of tick. So if should move to target returns true, then we move. Else, in that case, we're going to attack because we're close enough to the player. So that's what we did in this lecture.